What's up? Thomas Brandon here. Welcome to the Brandons. And if your bike is bogging, doesn't hit the power band like it should, if it's carbureted, specifically a 2-stroke, this works on 4 strokes too, but you just can't seem to get the most out of your bike, or it's not running the way that you think it should, chances are it's your carburetor. And in this video, I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know about carbureted dirt bikes, whether it's a 2-stroke or 4-stroke, it's an old steel frame YZ like I've got, or even a newer gas that's still got a carburetor. I'm going to be covering all of that in this video. Mikuni versus Keihin. Do these cheap carburetors you see online, are they worth getting? If so, which ones? And most importantly, I'm going to teach you how to jet the carburetor, because that is something that a lot of people don't understand, they're very afraid of, and I'm going to show you a 100% can't miss way. I know that sounds too good to be true, but trust me, you will know how to jet a carburetor and do it confidently at the end of this video. So if that sounds good to you, stick around. Now I've got a couple of carburetors down here. I've got 3 carburetors. I don't know if you can see them or not, but I've got 3 carburetors down here. I'm going to be using them as kind of examples. On this bike behind me, which is a 2000 YZ 125, I'm in the process of changing the carburetor that I've been running. Now, I'm going to dive into why that is and all the different reasons and how these things work and the sizing behind them and all of that in this video, okay? But first things first, let's just take a look at kind of the basics of this. And I've got some notes to kind of keep myself on track here, because if you've ever seen my other channel, which most of you probably haven't, I get kind of on these rants and tirades and stuff like that, and I kind of lose track. So first and foremost, how does a carburetor work? So first of all, this is a 38 millimeter Mikuni TMX. If you have a 2001 YZ 125 all the way up to a 2021 YZ 125, this is what came stock on your bike. This carburetor came stock on many of the KX 125s, RM 125s, CR 125s. The 38 millimeter Mikuni carburetor, this thing is everywhere. Okay, it is. Now, prior to 2001, on the YZ 125, for example, you had a 36 millimeter Mikuni carburetor that came stock. Now, what's the difference between a 36 and a 38? And is 2 millimeters really that big a deal? Well, believe it or not, it is. What that difference is, the 36 to a 38, is the difference in this right here. This is called the bore size. This has to do with the Venturi effect. The Venturi effect is about air movement, stuff like that. I don't want to get into aerodynamics and stuff like that, fluid dynamics, but just understand that it's the difference in the Venturi effect that is created bringing air into the engine. What you need to understand is that the higher the number, or the bigger the bore, the more top end the bike is going to have over rev. So think of it like that. Simplest way to look at it, on a 2-stroke like you got with the 125, if I throw a 38 millimeter on, it's going to have a little bit more top end and give up a little bit on the bottom. If I put on a 36 millimeter, it's going to have better bottom end and give up a little bit on the top end. Okay, so that's the easiest way to look at it. It's why so many of these bikes came with a 38, because these bikes are intended for motocross. If you think about motocross tracks, especially on like a 125, you were ringing these things necks. So that's why a lot of them went to the 38 millimeter, okay? Now, inside this carburetor, what you've got is you've got a series of things called jets. Here, you've got, in a Mikuni, and a Keihin also. Keihins do come with what's also called a power jet, and with that carburetor, it's gonna have a throttle positioning sensor on it. The one that I've got down here doesn't have that. We'll get more into that here in just a minute. But you've got jets, okay? So first off, you have what's called a pilot jet. The pilot jet is going to really affect the lower end of the throttle. So that lower range is your pilot jet, all right? Also your air screw. We'll talk about that more later when we get into the jetting. Then when you look at mid throttle, you've got your slide. The slide is this thing inside right here that moves up and down. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that's the slide. And the needle, we'll touch more on that when we get into the jetting. And then your wide open, you've got the main jet. Okay, now the main jet affects all of it, like they overlap as well, but to keep it simple, all right, that's kind of the way you want to look at it. When your bike is rich, okay, which means, we talk about rich means that it's getting more fuel than required than on the air fuel mixture. Okay, so that's everything that these things are doing. They're mixing air and fuel together to give you the optimal throttle response, power delivery, however you want to phrase it. Okay, that's what these are doing. So if it's lean, or excuse me, rich, it means that it's getting more fuel than air when it comes to that ratio. So what you would see is you would have a bog that's going to be really lazy. It's going to be sluggish. You're going to hit the throttle and it's going to go, but it's going to go, and it's going to kind of rev up really, really slow. Now, you'll have people who say, well, hey, man, on a 125, they just do that. That's why you got to work the clutch. That's true to a degree, but it can still also be lazy coming off the throttle because it's rich. And the more you do this, the more you'll know the difference. It will also, have times where it'll bog, where it'll boom, right? That's kind of that sluggishness. When you are lean, you will get more of not a bog, you'll get more of like a cutout. So you'll hit the throttle. It's almost like it's gasping for air. It'll be like, it's almost like a cough. You'll hit the throttle, the bike will just be ding, 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 and you just, boom, hit the throttle wide open, and instead of it going, boom, it'll go, boom. It'll be like a cutout, and then, boom. So that's lean. You also will get, like, up when you're wide open, you'll hear like a lean pop. It'll pop, 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 pop. There'll be a tinging sound you also hear. And that is kind of under that, what you would call detonation. Detonation is a video within itself. You will hear people talk about detonation, and there are so many different ways that detonation can sound in terms of descriptions. I've had this bike before detonating, and it sounds like there's marbles in the cylinder. Okay, like that's kind of how it sounds. It'll be a pinging sound. Another thing, if the bike's lean, is the throttle will hang. So it almost is like your throttle's stuck for a second. You'll rev it up, it'll rev up really, really high, and then you'll let off the throttle, and it's almost like the throttle hangs for just a second before it dips down. That's a sign of a lean bike, okay? So those are kind of your basics to this carburetor. And even though I just gave you a 30,000 foot view of it, right, you could see that there's quite a bit going on, and it's why people get so intimidated by these things. It's why people want to go out and they're like, dude, screw it, I'll just spend $500 on Electron or a smart carb. I personally, it's not that I don't like those, I just personally prefer these. When you get this thing tuned correctly, to me, there is no better fuel delivery system on a 2-stroke. 4 strokes, I'm with you. Electronic fuel injection, all that stuff, it's phenomenal. But on a 2-stroke, to me, if you get this thing dialed in, there's no better fuel delivery system in the world. Okay, in my opinion. All right, I will take a carbureted 2-stroke, right, YZ125, RM120, whatever it is. I will take that over a fuel injected 125 any day of the week. I just will. Even on a 250, I will take a carbureted one over a fuel injected one. All right, because I just think once they're tuned, when they're dialed in, there's nothing better. Okay, now really quick, you might be wondering what all of this is going on, right? And people be like, well, those are vent hoses. Yes, but there is a purpose to those. If you look at this carb here, this is the carb that came stock on the bike. You'll see that it's missing some hoses, which is important. Okay, a lot of people don't think about this, but this is important. I've seen people where they're running these things and they've got literally one vent hose. It's just this bottom one, and that's it, because they don't understand what these things do. These vent hoses are not just for air. One of the things that these will do is they will help keep fuel in the carburetor when you do stuff like jump. You see, when you jump, right, we've all had that feeling before when whether we're jumping and we're falling and all of a sudden we feel what? Like we're weightless, right? We feel lighter. Well, the same thing happens with fuel. When you jump and you've got fuel in this bowl down here, as you're coming down, well, guess what the fuel's doing? The fuel's coming up. So when this fuel comes up, what does it do? It comes up in these tubes and then it comes back down in the motor. It's making sure that you're not running this thing dry, because the last thing you want on a set of jumps, like in a rhythm section or anything like that, is to come down, all of a sudden you crack the throttle and you ain't got no throttle. The bike just cuts out because it ain't got no fuel. And the next thing you know, you're going up a jump face, no throttle, just coasting, and you're going to either do what? You're going to, hopefully, if you're lucky, just land in between the jumps or case it, into the jump face. That's nobody wants that, okay? So these are very important. You start losing, don't just be like, oh, screw it, I don't need them. You need them, okay? So make sure that you have them, all right? That's your basics in terms of what the carburetor is, how it works, stuff like that, all right? Now, thing out there in terms of like debate is going to be Mikuni versus Keihin, okay? This is what you're going to hear a lot of people talk about. If you go onto those, the message boards, Swap, Moto, whatever those message boards are out there, you will hear people saying all the time, hey man, should I get a Keihin carburetor for my bike? Should I get this? Should I try this? And understand that both of these can be very good, all right? In my personal experiences, I prefer a Keihin carburetor over a Mikuni. Now, that doesn't mean this is crap. It's not. It's still a very good carburetor. This carburetor, I've been running on this bike for the last few months, and it's worked phenomenal. And this carburetor is a 38 millimeter. Like I said, it did not come stock on this bike. I had a 36, the one down there. But the 36, I was having some issues with it, probably because it's 25 years old. And so I went online and I bought this. Now, I bought this off of eBay. It is a Mikuni carburetor. You can see it says Mikuni on there. Came in a Mikuni box and everything for like $150. That is a great deal. My buddy Kyle, who is former motocross racer, his kids race now, and he's somebody who knows his stuff, really knows his stuff when it comes to carburetors. He told me, he was like, dude, I don't even rebuild my carburetors anymore. He's like, at the end of every season, he goes, I literally take those off. I just get new ones from eBay. And he goes, I run the cheap off-brand ones for like $50 a pop. I didn't do that with this one, but that's what he does. He's done it for years, and he says they work. I haven't personally tried that, so I can't recommend that, okay? What I will say is, if you want to get a Keihin carburetor, and this is a 36 millimeter, and I'll explain here in a minute why I went to a 36 instead of a 38. If you want a Keihin carburetor, this thing is going to be hundreds of dollars. I think a 36 millimeter Keihin carburetor online, a legit Keihin carburetor, the best deal I could find was like $400. And you can only find it from like 1 or 2 spots, all right? Now, you can go on eBay and you can find used ones, or like Facebook Marketplace, and you can find used ones, but you're still going to spend a couple $100. And if I'm going to spend that much on a used carburetor, I would just add another $100 and get a new one. But this is actually not a Keihin. You'll see right here, it's got the badge where it would say Keihin, but there's nothing on that. That's because this is what is known as a QA parts card. This comes from Rocky Mountain ATV, which is the only reason why I would use this, why I am going to use this. And that is because it's coming from a very reputable dealer. If this was coming from Uncle Harry's MX parts on eBay, I would not use it, okay? But from Rocky Mountain, I will, because those guys are a legit distributor. Now, this carburetor, I want to say, cost $40 after shipping and everything, which is incredible. And I've used Keihin carburetors for years. When I raced outlaw karts, this was the carburetor that we ran. It was a Keihin, but it was, this is, like I said, this is just a non-branded Keihin. Whenever we, in the 125 class, that's what we ran back then, was 125 two-strokes. I'm talking, this was in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. And then in the open class, which is where CR 500s, we ran 38 millimeter Keihin flat slide carburetors. No power jet, just the straight ones like this, okay? This carburetor is a 36 millimeter parts card, which, like I said, is an off-branded Keihin. Now, you might be wondering, Tommy, why did you get a 36? The reason I got a 36 millimeter is this 125 behind me. All right, you guys know, like I've said, I'm starting motocross this year. although I rode dirt bikes for years, I never did motocross. I used to do like some single track stuff, you know, trail riding, that type of thing, but I never did motocross. I'm 41 years old. I don't want to have to be sitting there fanning the clutch like this, you know, every single corner. Now, obviously, on a 125, you got to do that to some extent anyways. But a 36 millimeter carb is going to help coming out of those corners a little bit better bottom end. I'm not going to be wringing this thing's neck on the pipe 6 gear wide open, you know, throughout the whole track. I'm just not going to. That's those days have long since passed for me. Okay, so this is going to help me out more on the bottom end, which is what I want. And because this carb is so good, I'm probably not going to lose much, if anything, on the top end versus the Mikuni. Then that has been my experience over the years. Now, this carburetor doesn't come for a 2000 YZ125. I had to get it for a 2000 YZ250, okay? But it fits. It goes right on, it fits, okay? So there's no problem. When I talk about the bore size, right, that's the inner diameter of this right here. The outer diameter is also usually the same. So if I take this 38 millimeter Mikuni and I put it up to this, you'll see that the outside bore is the same. So it's gonna fit on the air boot and the motor regardless, okay? So that's why I went with this, all right? Now, here comes the most important question. How the hell do I jet this, right? This didn't come stock on this bike. I can't use the stock YZ250 jetting settings for a 125. You can't do that. It's not going to work. Okay? So how do I jet this, right? How did I know how to jet this 38 millimeter Mikuni carburetor when I went from a 36 to a 30? How did I know how to do that? Was it just my, you know, my decades of carburetor experience and know-how? As much as I would love to say, yeah, that's it. That's not it. There's a way to jet these, and it's basically foolproof. All right, it really is. Every time I've tried it, it has worked. I have only needed to change, in this thing right here, I only needed to change one setting. And the initial jetting that I did on this, it gave me an option on that one setting. So it was for the needle. It said you could have it in either start in clip position 2 or clip position 3. I started off in clip position 3. Okay, and I ended up going to 2. So that's it. That was the only time it was not correct. All right. So how do we do this? What's the secret to jetting this? Because I'm going to do this with you guys right now as I get this set up for this bike. So how do we do this? Well, let me show you. So the way that you do this is this. And I don't know if you can see this, but what this is ChatGPT 4 to be precise. Now, I have tested this on the free ChatGPT, which I think is ChatGPT 3 or 3.5. So I do pay for this. It's like $20 a month for the latest version. But there is a free version that I believe you can get, which is like 3.5 or 3, and it still is good. It still will work on this. The thing that you need to understand about ChatGPT, and I don't want to do an entire training series on this, but the thing you need to understand about this is that your prompt, or the way that you ask it, is the most important part. So if I were to ask ChatGPT, if I said, hey, how do I jet my 2000 YZ125? What it's going to do is it's going to give me the stock jetting settings for the carburetor that came on this, the stock pipe, everything. It's going to basically give me what it says in the manual for the 2000 YZ125. And then it might give you a couple of notes that say something like, if you're at this sea level, or if you're above, 4,000 feet above sea level, make this adjustment or something like that. Okay. So you have to ask this thing the prompt correctly. So for example, if I was going to ask this, like, hey, dude, obviously I wouldn't refer to ChatGPT as dude, but if I were to be like, hey, here's the deal. I am going to be, going from a 38 millimeter Mikuni to a 36 millimeter Keihin carburetor. Like I said, even though that's not a Keihin, it's an off-branded Keihin. Everything is basically the same. And really quick, a quick aside on this. The only difference that I've seen with this versus an actual Keihin, which like I said, I've used tons of them, is the finish of this versus the Keihin is not as good, right? It's a little bit rougher. It's not as smooth. It's not as shiny. It's not as pretty. Other than that, I bought Keihin jets. They go right into this thing, okay? This is a Keihin. I mean, everything's like the same, all right? So this is a Keihin carb, and Keihin parts will work in it. It's just not branded a Keihin, all right? So if you're one of those people who's like, dude, I gotta have the brand, well, then go spend $400. If you're like, dude, I just want the performance, I just want the result, and I want to save the money, then go to Rocky Mountain and get yourself a QA parts card, because this thing works great. So anyways, if I'm doing this in ChatGPT, I want to give it the correct prompt. I don't want this thing to just jet my bike based on the stock setting. I want this thing to jet my bike like legit, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell ChatGPT, hey, you are, for example, you are motocross, professional and pro circuit owner Mitch Payton. You're jetting my 2000 YZ125, which is running on pump gas with a pro circuit pipe and shorty silencer. Everything else on the motor is stock, or it's got V-Force reeds on it, and then everything else on the motor is stock. The carburetor is a 36 millimeter Keihin flat slide carburetor, and I'm running at sea level. Please give me the starting jetting specifics or settings, okay? And then it's going to give them. And when I asked it that prompt, you can see right here, you can read that, it gives it to me. Main jet 168 to 172, pilot jet 45 to 48, needle CEL or DGL in the middle clip position, slide 6 or 7, most PWK 36s come with a 6, air screw 1.5 to 2 turns out. There you go. And I put that in and try it, and then we go from there. This thing tells you, fine tuning, if it bogs or hesitates at full throttle, drop the main jet. If it sputters or feels rich on top, go smaller on the main jet. If it hesitates or is sluggish at low RPMs, adjust air screw first, then go leaner or richer based on what happens on pilot jet. If it feels weak in the mid-range, raise or lower the clip based on the feeling, whether it's lean or rich, all right? It says, hey, since you're running this, I hadn't told it, but it says, since you're running this, what fuel are you running? It basically asked me the question. I said, I'm running 92 pump gas at sea level. Then it gave me specifics. 170 main jet, 45 pilot jet, CEL needle, third position, slide cutaway 6, 1.5 turns out. Make sure that the float height is at 8 millimeters. It gives me everything down to the float height. And there you go. ChatGPT does it. Now let's say, right, because right now I'm at sea level. So then let's say I want to do that, because keep in mind this, when you pay for this, which like I said, it's only $20 a month. And if you are like a moto dad or a moto mom, you need this, because this will help you in a multitude of ways. You can ask this thing any question that you want. It doesn't have to just be about jetting. It could be about air pressure. It could be about your suspension settings. Like, hey, normally we run a hard pack track, we're running a sand track. How should I adjust my sag and my suspension on my son's 2024 YZ85, right? Like it'll answer those questions for you, and it'll give you guidelines for those who don't know, because that's the biggest thing is people, they just don't know, and they're scared to do anything because they're afraid of messing things up. And this tool is so helpful for people who just are worried about messing things up. I know people, I've gone to the track before and heard people's bikes where they're just, dude, they're lean, you can hear it. It's like, dude, you're gonna melt your topping. I don't like to mess with the jetting, man, because I'm worried I'm gonna screw it up. Dude, you drop the bowl and let the fuel come out, and you pull the main jet out, and it's got a, it's a 440, and you put in a 450. I mean, it's not hard, right? I don't like to do that. Hey man, you need to adjust your needle. No, I don't like to do that. You know, I'm worried that that I might not put the clip on correctly and the needle's going to fall into the motor. But, okay, you know what I mean? Like, people are just scared to mess things up. This tool will help you a ton. And it'll help you adjust it. If I say, hey, dude, I'm going next week, I'm running at Mammoth, right? Which is obviously way up in the mountains. I'm running this bike at Mammoth. How do I adjust my jetting for Mammoth? It's going to tell me. It will tell me. In fact, we can do that right now. And there's my answer. I mean, from the magic of editing, it was only a few seconds for you guys, but it was only a split second for you guys. But for me, it was maybe less than a minute, okay? And it comes up with an entire answer here, right? And it gives you not only the answer, but it gives you an explanation as to why. So it helps you learn, right? I already know this because I've done this for years, but some people haven't, right? And like I said, they're afraid to do it because they don't want to screw things up. This says Mammoth motocross is roughly 8,000 feet. You'll need to lean out your jetting compared to sea level setup. The air is thinner at high elevation, so your bike will run richer. And if you don't adjust it, okay? It's like, here's a good starting point. And it gives it for my carburetor, PWK 36 millimeter 2000 YZ125. Main jet 155 to 158. It says start with a 158 and go leaner if needed. Pilot jet 40 to 42. Leaner pilot for less fuel at RPMs. Needle, second clip position. Air screw, 2 turns out. It'll give you an additional adjustments. It says, hey, if the bike feels sluggish in the mid-range, try dropping the needle clip 1 more position. If it bogs at full throttle, try a 155 jet. So, you know, keep an extra spark plug handy as rich conditions at altitude can foul plugs faster, right? Most people know that, but there's a lot of people, believe it or not, that don't. So this tool, okay, it's incredible for carburetors. Look, like I said, I've done this for years, but when I was going from a Mikuni, the 38 millimeter Mikuni, to a 36 millimeter, you know, PWK, I didn't know where to start with on the jetting. I had a rough idea based on my experience from decades ago, but I didn't know for sure. And good thing I looked it up, because guess what? I was a little bit off, especially on the pilot jet. I was pretty far off. So this is a very valuable tool. Very valuable tool. All right? And it can help you jet your carburetor on any bike. Any bike with the carburetor, it can help you. And the beautiful thing about this is like I said, my buddy does this all the time, but you can go out, you can get a brand new carb, right? You can get a parts carb from Rocky Mountain, or you can get a, you know, if you want a Mikuni, you can get a Mikuni off of eBay. You can get it for less than $200, which on dirt bikes, that's a great deal. You can go buy a whole jetting kit on Amazon for that carburetor for less than $10. And you can get a ChatGPT app, and you can start jetting your bike and getting it running 100 times better, and you can do it in no time flat. And that is incredible. When I was growing up riding dirt bikes, I mean, if we wanted to jet, it was a nightmare. When I was racing outlaw carts, jetting, I mean, the only way, we had to fly up and down the road and then look at the plug, right? Do a chop test on a new plug and see where we were at. You don't have to do that anymore. Yes, if you want to get the absolute best performance out of it, the most precise jetting, yes, do a chop test. But for the most part, ChatGPT will give it to you, and for 95% of you out there, it's going to give you, hands down, exactly what you need. All right. Now, really quick before I wrap this up, if you want to actually learn about the jetting process, like not only, you know, what's in these carburetors, but like, you know, how to remove them, how to change them, how to adjust everything, like actually do everything. I was going to do a video on it myself, but the reason why I'm not going to is somebody has already done one. And unfortunately, they're no longer with us. It's Cameron Niemela. If you follow the motocross stuff online, you probably heard that name. But Cam's, he was a legend, is a legend. And he did a video on carburetor tuning, jetting your carburetor. That is, it's the best video that you can watch, okay? Hands down. So if you want to actually see this stuff, like in the step-by-step process, what everything is, how to actually, I mean, he sits there and shows you how to pull the jet, I mean, everything to the last detail. Watch that video. I'll have a link for it down in the description below because it's an incredible video. It's about 45 minutes long, but it's worth it. So if you actually want to learn every single detail, go watch that video. There's no reason for me to repeat it. He walks you through it. He does it in an incredible way. So go watch that video, okay? Like I said, use ChatGPT to get you the settings. You can watch his video if you want to, if you actually need to figure out how to pull things out and do all that stuff like that, okay? So, you guys, that's going to do it. I hope this video has helped you in some way. I hope the explanation of the carburetor, how it works, what it does, all the things like that, the sizing, all that stuff, I hope all that helps you. If it does, you know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe, all that other crap that every other YouTuber on earth asks you to do. I don't need to repeat that again. And make sure you stick around because I'm going to be doing a direct comparison in another video here coming up. I'll be putting this carburetor on, running it, and I'll be showing you kind of a direct comparison of the Mikuni versus the PWK, 38 versus 36, that type of thing. So that sounds interesting to you. You want to make sure that you are subscribed so you can catch that video. But you guys, that's going to do it. Thank you very much for joining me. Until next time, take care.